It is 7:45. The Northern Territory Parliament will today sit in an emergency session to make changes to the Territory's bail laws. The move comes after the stabbing death of a 71-year-old grocer in Nightcliff last week and a number of incidents involving edged weapons in the last week and beyond. The bill, to be titled Bail and Youth Justice Legislation Amendment 2025, is the second change to bail laws in the last year, following the introduction of Declan's Law in October. C.M Finocchiaro is the Chief Minister of the Northern Territory. Your guest, thanks for coming back into the studio, Chief.
Good morning, Adam, and your listeners.
You've called these the toughest bail laws in the country. What exactly are the changes?
Yeah, we've looked to that New South Wales model, as I indicated to the community last week, and what our laws today will do is set an overarching test. So there'll be two additional tests for judges when they're considering bail. The first will be, is there any risk to the community? And the second will then be requiring judges or police, because it's anyone who can grant bail, the decision maker. So they'll have to decide, is there an ongoing risk to the community? And then they'll also have to satisfy themselves personally to a high degree of confidence that that person, if bailed, would not go on to commit a serious violence offence or a prescribed offence, and we have a long list of offences that meet that criteria, or will be an ongoing risk to the community. So it really puts front and centre community safety as their number one consideration amongst all the other things judges have to do. And what we've done is align that, because it's one thing to have our government make law and order and community safety our number one priority, which it is, but we've got to also make it the number one priority of the courts. And this is our way to be able to do that when they're considering bail.
One of the defining sections of our criminal law is that you are innocent
Correct.
Until proven guilty. Does not this, by reducing the presumption of innocence, by not allowing bail, doesn't that reduce the presumption of innocence?
No, and that's a really important principle, and of course we've got to respect that, which is why there's discretion built into the test. Ultimately, people will still continue to be bailed, and if you are not a risk to the community and you're not going to go on and commit crimes, then it is reasonable that you are bailed. You might continue to go to work and look after your family, for example, until your court date. And ultimately, when people go to court, some are found innocent and some are found guilty. But what we've got to do is make sure that the right tests are in place for judges. And, obviously over the last 8 months, our government has passed, sweeping reforms around law and order, amongst other things. And we've always said that's just the beginning. There's always been more work that's needed to be done. And that's evidenced by the fact that we're partway through a rewrite of the Youth Justice Act, for example. And so this reform is a necessary measure to make sure we're really enshrining as an overarching principle and consideration for the judges that, is this person a risk to the community? Will they go on to commit further offences? And we've made it very simple, and ultimately we believe it really aligns with the expectations of Territorians that judges are considering the safety of the community above everything else.
And you say they weren't? The bench was not considering the safety of community above everything else?
Well, I'll leave others to draw their conclusions, but what I will say is it wasn't enshrined in Section 24 of the Bail Act. So what we've done is put it in there. And this was, of course, highlighted. Your listeners will remember when the young person was bailed to 𝙤𝙦𝙬𝙬 for a funeral. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court put out a 4-page statement, which is highly unusual. At paragraph 17 of that statement, he very clearly talked about there being a test in New South Wales that we did not have here. And that's the test we're talking about. We've gone further than New South Wales, absolutely. And there are some clear distinctions. One is that in New South Wales, it only applies to youth. We are making this principle apply to youth and adults. In New South Wales, their prescribed offences it applies to is a rather short list. Ours is a very long list of around 200 offences plus. And we've made it, in New South Wales, it's a single test. We've made it a double test.
So what's the recourse for you if the bench, the judges or the police officers, as you say, I think that person's okay, I've sent them on bail, and then they go on to commit a crime? What do you do there?
Well, there isn't any recourse.
Okay.
judges, the separation of powers, judges are independent, they're appointed for life effectively. There's no...
let's go to the New South Wales
Yes.
case. We know that there was a 32% increase
That's right.
in the number of children behind bars once those legislation was put in place. You okay to put in 30% more children behind bars in the Northern Territory?
Yeah, and we can probably expect that to be higher here, Adam. And of course, in New South Wales, that was just youth, and we already have a correction system under pressure, and we acknowledge that. But a lot of work has been done. We've brought online more than 500 additional beds, and we're urgently looking to put another 100 into Berrima, for example, amongst the work we're doing with our boot camps and work camps, which are a very important part of our corrections plan.
Well, let's go to that. Let's go to this issue because there are going to be more people.
There will be.
Behind prison. We already know that the Police Association. We already know that the union behind the association looking after the prison officers says we are at risk already. Are you prepared to put those prison officers at more risk?
It's a balancing act and it's imperfect, and we've inherited an entire justice system. So from the laws to the courts to the corrections, that has been putting the historical trauma of offenders above the rights of people to be safe. So this is a very imperfect situation. But Territorians, I just need to make...
I don't think it's fair that you say you've inherited a system because you have put more than 500 extra prisoners behind bars since you've come to office, and now we would expect, I don't know how many more, but quite a few more.
Yeah, so no, in terms of inheriting the system was geared up around offenders. That's why they were out on the streets. We're trying to recorrect that to make sure community safety is the number one priority. And it's a very, very layered process. But people need to understand, and I know there's a lot of talk in the community, prison's not the answer. And it's not an answer per se, but at the end of the day, you either have people who are a risk to the community on the street or they are in prison. There is no magical place that people go and all of a sudden they become better people. Now, rehab's important, but that is the reality. It is free or prison. And right now in our community, we need to make sure that people are as safe as possible. And the root causes work is being done as a separate piece of work.
Let's have a listen to a couple of those people. One of them is Larrakia Elder Richard Fijo, and then you're going to hear from the Northern Territory Children's Commissioner, Shalina Musk.
Poverty is our enemy. And that's the bottom line, because if we're able to treat poverty, that means that a lot of this stuff should not be happening.
To actually address the drivers of crime, we need to not just be passing laws, which can be seen as a quick fix. We need to be tackling the root causes, and there are a raft of factors. They're often interrelated and interconnected. And I really back in what Larrakia Nation had offered in their statement is working together with government, working with experts, working with community leaders to try to tackle these issues as they arise locally, regionally and across the Territory.
What's your reaction?
Look, there are many factors that deal with root causes, and one that I almost never hear anyone talk about is parental responsibility. I mean, this is key. It's not a government that raises a child. It's meant to be the mum and dad. Or
what's gone wrong there? That's what I asked the Children's Commissioner, exactly that question.
A lot has gone wrong. We've not seen economic opportunities and development in the regions, which means a lot of people don't have jobs. We've got a welfare system that makes people dependent. It's a terrible situation where kids aren't going to school, and that's the work we've started. And with our really tough approach on getting kids to school, we're seeing really excellent early results, because if kids can get to school, they have an opportunity for a future. We're getting to families with our family responsibility agreements, and we've signed up, I think, 70 families to family responsibility contracts effectively. And we're actually working on right now a piece of legislation around parental responsibility that's enforceable, because we need...
Are you going to take the flat screen televisions away from their
It
homes
doesn't
again?
have that, but at the end of the day, people need to take responsibility for themselves, and I just think the gross lack of personal accountability that is taking place in society is out of control, and we are here to bring that back.
Get back to the jails. You say you're just going to squeeze them in however you are able to do.
Correct.
With the extra prisoners that are going to be in there. We have the highest incarceration rates in the country by fourfold.
Yes.
We have the highest recidivism rates in the country by twofold. What are the rehab opportunities or the rehab programs that are going on in prison at the moment?
We do have the highest numbers, and ultimately, we can't just stop sending people to prison because our numbers are high. If there are that volume of people breaking the law and hurting other people, then we unfortunately have to deal with it. It's a terrible number. I wish it wasn't that, Adam, but
So what are the rehab things that you're putting on in the prisons at the moment?
We've had some really good data come through because rehab was a big part of our plan in addressing the root causes of crime, and we really believe that while you have that captive audience, you can make a real difference. So, for example, we have a domestic violence program we run in prison. It goes for 6 months. It's quite intensive. And when we've looked at the data on last year compared to this year, we've had 41 completions of that DV program in prison versus 12 when you compare it to 23-24. So again, despite the challenges we've had with staffing and overcrowding in our prisons, we've still been able to deliver much higher levels of completion. I mean, even for our family violence program, we had 103 people complete it versus 95. And there are a range of other educational programs where we had 671 prisoners complete education programs compared to 553 in the previous year. So that work is happening despite all the challenges. We know the work crews are back out, which particularly our seniors love, and I know it's on a more limited schedule, but we've got 31 new recruits who've just graduated, 33 more in the college. G4S are out there supporting corrections, so it's coming together.
We can hear more next week. Thank you, Chief Minister, for coming in this morning.
Everyone.
There's the Chief Minister of the Northern Territory, 𝙄𝙣𝙩𝙚𝙬𝙬. Finocchiaro. Almost time for the latest in ABC News. The Trump factor plays a huge role in the Canadian government's re-election. Will it be a factor as Australia votes this weekend? That will be your focus on
As we know, Parliament is indeed going to be rescheduled. Well, it's been rescheduled. It is sitting today on urgency. We just heard from the Speaker of the Northern Territory's Legislative Assembly, Robin Lamley, that the last time this happened was about 5 years ago through the COVID emergency. Joining me on the line is the Chief Minister of the Northern Territory, 𝙤𝙤 Finocchiaro. Good morning, Chief Minister.
Good morning, Katie, and good morning to your listeners.
Chief Minister, some further detail now since we last spoke on Monday on exactly what legislation is going to be amended. Can you talk our listeners through that?
Yeah, absolutely. So today at 10 o'clock, Parliament has been recalled, and we're just going to have an entire day of Parliament based around this bill. There'll be no other parliamentary business. It won't be a normal sitting day. It's an emergency day to urgently pass this bill. The details of the bill are now very clear, and we briefed Labor and the independent members late yesterday afternoon. And so how it will work is we've looked to the New South Wales model and made it stronger than that. In New South Wales, they have an overarching test of community safety when considering bail. What we've done is taken that and made it 2 additional tests in our system. So currently, judges have to go through a long list of things they consider under the Bail Act, and what we've done is inserted into that a community safety test around whether or not there is a risk to the community if a person is bailed, and then a second test, which is where the decision maker, which might be the courts or it might be a judge or it might be police, have to satisfy themselves with a high degree of confidence that the person they are considering bail for will not go on to commit a prescribed offence or another serious offence or endanger the community, which is a very high threshold. And that is not only stronger than New South Wales because it's 2 additional tests, but our list of prescribed offences is in excess of 200 different crimes, so it's much longer. And also in New South Wales, this community safety test only applies to youths. We are making it apply to both youths and adults. And on top of that, Katie, and I've talked to you about it over the last couple of weeks, where we've been doing our rewrite of the Youth Justice Act, and we were looking at removing the principle of detention as last resort for young people.
Yep.
We will remove that today as well on top of this additional double community safety test.
Do you know if the opposition is going to support that aspect of this with the youths?
I don't know officially. My understanding is they have indicated they will, and we're unclear about the crossbench.
Chief Minister, obviously this all seems like, like a lot of common sense in the sense that that community safety test, I mean, we've already had people message through this morning saying, Katie, one in particular said, I'm stupefied that that's not already part of the legislation. But, nonetheless, this is a good thing that this is changing. I think the community's expectation is that it does. But what is going to stop a judge from still releasing somebody on bail? I mean, is there any recourse whatsoever if it is still determined, if the judge considers everything and says, all right, well, it does seem as though this person is going to be not a risk to the community, yet they do go out and offend? What's the recourse?
Yeah, there is no recourse, but what this does is not just mean that it's our government that has community safety as its top priority. It means that the courts now have that priority as well. So it is different, and I think when we saw the bail example happen with the 𝙄𝙣𝙩𝙚𝙬 case, obviously the Chief Justice put out his 4-page letter, which highlighted this option, and we've taken it up. It was something we were looking at straight away as part of that bigger rewrite, but we've urgently brought it forward to today to make it abundantly clear, absolutely crystal clear, that community safety is a very, very important consideration, and ultimately people can still be bailed under this system, but it requires then a absolute conscious decision making of the decision maker around whether or not there is an ongoing risk to the community and any risk of further offending.
Yep.
And so the people who are bailed should not present a risk to the community, in which case that's absolutely fine. Bail is, you're in a position of innocent until proven guilty, and if you're not a risk to the community, then there's no reason why the judiciary can't make those decisions. But what we're trying to stop is obviously people who have a propensity to offend.
Chief Minister, is there going to be a review of those already on bail to ensure that there are not other violent criminals out there putting the community at risk that should be behind bars?
Yeah, and we're dealing with historical issues. I mean, we've had an entire system geared up around the right of the offender and their traumatic experiences in life versus the trauma of the community in being subjected to crime. So it's a big reframe that we're doing as a new government, but ultimately we've got corrections and police backtracking through everyone who is on bail under Labor's laws.
So there is a review underway right now?
Yeah, they're working through doing those bail checks and all of those things, but ultimately people bailed under the old system, unless they come into contact in terms of a breach of bail or something like that, they get to continue being on bail. So that's why that review is important moving forward.
Let me just get this really straight for the community. So there is a review underway into everybody that's currently on bail, but unless they breach their bail, that will not change. Even if they are a serious violent offender, they'll remain on bail.
If they're on bail and they're complying with their bail and they're not offending, yes, that they will continue on bail. And
do you feel comfortable with that?
Well, that is it is the situation it is. They have been bailed under a previous law, and that law continues to apply to them. But what we've done is made sure our new test applies straight away. So, for example, if someone breaches their bail, might be a condition of bail or something like that, then the new test applies. If they commit an offence and apply for bail, the new test will apply. If they commit an offence before our law changes, so say it was yesterday, but they haven't had their bail application yet, our new law will apply. And we've also made it so that if someone is charged or someone's matter is through the local court and then it jumps up into the Supreme Court because of the severity of the matter, then that will be treated under the new test. So it would be
Okay.
a fresh bail application. So it is comprehensive, and then police and corrections are doing that historical work of checking through who is currently out on bail.
And Chief Minister, do police and corrections have any idea how many people we currently have on bail?
Yeah, they would. It's a substantial number of people who are out on bail for many various different types of crime.
Is there going to be a review or another look at as well the way in which these ankle monitoring devices are either handed out or monitored? Because it seems like they're not working, particularly in the cases of youths.
Yeah, so we've talked about this before, Katie, and it's work we're doing as part of our processes on coming to government is how we can strengthen electronic monitoring, get better process communication between corrections and police, live monitoring, all of those different types of things, because it is a third-party system. It's not a government system.
Yep.
So that work is happening, and it's been happening urgently, and I think we're nearly at a point where we can move forward with some good change in that space. So that is coming together, and we just continue to push. It's not just bail. There's lots of other areas that are massive
And
concern.
I do want to ask about a few of those. I mean, there's questions coming through. Have the amendments been properly thought through? I mean, some people are saying this is a knee-jerk reaction after what has been a week since the tragedy that we saw in Nightcliff.
No. Yes, it has been well thought through. And ultimately, if we've got to go back and change things again, we've got the opportunity to do that in May. But ultimately, once Justice Grant raised this issue a couple of months ago, we've started work on it and absolutely flagged it as like, fantastic, we'll do that. So it's been part of the mix of the rewrite of the Youth Justice Act. I've urgently brought it forward because it's not just the tragic death we've seen last week. There's been a number of very serious offences alleged to have been committed by people on bail. And so we've brought this forward because it is the pinnacle, paramount test. It overarches all considerations. Now,
in terms of the changes, so obviously, judges need to be confident that there's not a further risk to the community when it comes to community safety. You spoke about the youth element as well, where remand is no longer a final resort. So essentially, people can be taken into detention, or detention probably is the more correct term. What do you think this is going to mean in terms of the number of young people that we've got then in our youth detention facilities, and how often are young people being, let out to maybe stay at another supervised facility rather than in a corrections facility when the community's expectation may be that they are under the care of corrections?
Yeah, so I don't know those numbers, but for example, just the New South Wales test alone, which is that community safety test we will put to Parliament today, that created a 32% increase in incarceration of young people in New South Wales. So we fully expect those numbers, if not higher, just as a result of our bail laws. On top of that, removing the principle of detention as last resort just removes this concept that young people can't be dealt with under the law. Like, it's just, again, going back to the historical issues, coronial after coronial, Royal Commission after Royal Commission, Labor, moving in a totally different direction where no one's held responsible for their own actions. And so to have police and the courts having to start with a position of, well, I shouldn't be involved in with this young person in the first place. By removing that, we can deal with young people properly. And at the end of the day, we would rather intervene in a young person's life earlier and have the chance to put them on the right course, make sure they understand what they did was wrong, and give them the support they need to move forward and be productive, then wait until they're an adult, they continue with their offending, and they end up in an adult prison, virtually in and out for the rest of their life. That's what we're trying to stop.
Chief Minister, how much room do we have in the youth prison at the moment?
Oh, I don't have the numbers, but we do have capacity there. I'm confident of that. Now, our prison system is certainly
overflowing.
Stretched, but it is what it is. They're either on the street or they're in prison.
So
that's the reality.
in terms of the adult correctional facilities, we are expecting to see a massive surge here, from what I can gather, in terms I don't know. Are you expecting it to be a massive surge in prisoner numbers, and what are you anticipating?
Yeah, we don't have a specific number, but absolutely we're ready and expecting a huge increase in pressure. So this is, it is what it is. There is nothing we can do about that. We've inherited a system that wasn't fit for purpose. So already in 8 months, we've brought on more than 500 additional beds. We've got another 100 imminent. And we've had 31 corrections officers just graduate. Yep. There's 33 more in the college right now. We've got the G4S staff obviously supporting that, and we'll continue to grow those numbers.
Yeah.
So it is an imperfect situation, but at the end of the day, like I said, people are either on the street or they're in prison or in a detention facility, and
Chief
that's
Minister,
where we're at right now.
Are we in a situation, though, within our correctional facilities where people aren't actually undertaking rehabilitation programs, or they're not actually doing anything to become better people rather than better crims?
No, and I've got some great updates on that, Katie. I'm really glad you asked. So despite, and people are very familiar with the challenges we've had with corrections, despite the absolute best efforts of our staff out there who do an incredible job, we are still delivering education and rehab and work school programs despite all of the pressure issues, and we're having really good results. So, for example, our RAGE program, which is a 6-month intensive DV program, we had 41 completions this year versus 12 under Labor. So huge increase. We had 103 completions of a family violence program compared to 95 under Labor. And for educational programs, we had 671 prisoners complete them compared to 553. So some really good data. And that's completion. That's not people who, just signed up to it. That's completions. And we want to really, really grow that, but we've got to steady the ship. And right now, we're in a crisis situation that requires a crisis response. But
Chief,
people can rest assured there is rehab going on, and it's getting out there and growing.
Chief Minister, I know you've got to get into Parliament in just a couple of moments. I want to ask you, we did have a situation earlier, towards the end of last week, where Larrakia Nation, their CEO, Michael Rottimer, had released a statement, and he said that Larrakia Nation's calling on senior Aboriginal lawmen and women from remote communities supported by the Northern, Central, Tiwi and Andiliaqua land councils to work alongside us in restoring community discipline and cultural authority, including returning non-permanent residents to their home communities where appropriate and addressing unacceptable behaviours that harm our people and our reputation. He said he's also personally written to both yourself and the Minister for Aboriginal Affairs in March, seeking your support for a formal initiative that empowers their senior Aboriginal lawmen and women to lead culturally appropriate responses to this growing crisis. Is that something that also needs to be happening? I totally... I think at the moment we've got what feels like a gaping wound that needs to be worked upon in the right now.
Right now,
but then
yes.
we also have a situation where behaviour does not seem to be getting better, and you've got Aboriginal leadership stepping forward saying, we want to make some impact in this space. Is that something that you're prepared to work with them on?
Oh, absolutely, Katie, and it's an important part of it, and the root causes part is critical, and having the buy-in of Aboriginal leadership is critical as well, and their involvement in this space, and that's all that root causes work that is run simultaneous with the pointy end stuff. Often we only get to talk about corrections, courts, police because it's the most pressing. But equally, it's why we're taking parental responsibility really seriously by having enforceable family responsibility agreements, getting kids to school, and we're having some really good impact on families getting kids to school because of the tough approach we've taken with parents. So that work will continue on, and we'll continue those conversations with Larrakia Nation. And it's a community problem as much as anything else, but we've all got to make sure that there's personal responsibility. And at the end of the day, people don't have to make the decision to do the wrong thing. And that's the point we have to get to.
Chief Minister Leah Finocchiaro, we are going to have to leave it there. Thank you for your time. It is much appreciated. I know our listeners appreciate the fact that you have talked us through how this legislation is going to change. Look, I think we all hope that it's going to make a difference, but time will tell.
Yeah, absolutely. And, nothing is 100%, but this puts an extremely high threshold and makes sure that the community's safety is enshrined in the law. There's no getting around that. If your listeners want to tune in today, you can do that from your desktop at work or at home or wherever you might be through the Legislative Assembly of the Northern Territory, and this will be the only thing that we go through today.
Chief Minister, thank you. Appreciate your time.